What's going on, everyone? You know what day it is. Welcome back to another episode of the H Panel, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and as you can see, we have upgraded our microphone. Shout out to my wonderful aunt for giving me a Shure microphone for my birthday. The H Panel is moving up in the world, ladies and gentlemen. The blue snowball that I always used, will still be very near and dear to my heart. I've used this bad boy for the last 5 to 6 years for every movie I've filmed, every H panel episode, even just filming rap songs with my friend Tay in my mom's basement. This bad boy has been through a lot and it has always delivered. So if you're in the market looking for a microphone to either do podcasts or gaming or whatever needs a microphone, and you're looking for a cheap option, the Blue Snowball is definitely the way to go. And I'm not sponsored by this company, but if they really wanted to do a sponsorship with the H panel, I am more than happy to do that. Now, this bad boy will only come into play for introductions for the time being, as I did do a backlog of episodes with the Blue Snowball. But I am so excited about this microphone. I can't express it enough. My best friends will vouch for me when I say I was, sending pictures. I was ranting about it, saying how we're moving up. It's a very exciting time to be the host of the H panel. And I can't wait to have you all here for the ride. So for this episode of the show, I am joined by JT Wahlberg. JT is the author of the new book, I Forgot to Stay Sober, How I Nearly Died Kicking My Addiction to Alcohol. He uses his previous experience of battling a relationship with alcohol to not only inspire those going through this battle, but to also encourage proper research and doctor consultation as you're going through it. JT's story is so inspiring, and I wanted to thank him again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now, if you've been here before, guys, you know the drill. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on a podcast platform, share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. I'm Harry Potvin, and this is the H Panel. We are live. JT, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Thank you so much for having me, Harry. I'm stoked to be here and have a great conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm stoked too, man. I love your story because, and this is kind of why I love that you asked to come on, because your whole story and your journey and the book that you've written, it's one of those things that I think we don't give enough attention to. Honestly, I think in our society and we're going to get into it more later, but there's like this almost normalcy of heavy drinking in society, and it's like it's almost weird if you don't do that. And I wanted to talk to you about that, and we'll get into it later. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. So where does your story with alcohol addiction, where does that start?
It starts early, Harry. It starts from when I was a young teenager. And even before that, I just saw all the adults in my life having so much fun on weekends and events. And it didn't matter if it was a children's birthday party, a cousin's birthday party, or one of the adults' birthday parties, or whatever event it was. If we were celebrating, there was booze. If we weren't celebrating, if we were grieving, there was booze. And the adults always got louder, and even the least funny jokes became funny. And I always thought, wow, like this is so cool. I want to be a part of this. I can't wait to grow up. And then when I was 13, I got drunk for the first time and really never looked back. All through high school, I got into a career in hospitality as a young chef, and I could hide very well in that industry because liquor, wine, and beer sales are such a huge part of it, and it's what you do. It was work, get off, hit the bar, go to the pub, rinse and repeat, and it just became everything that I did revolved around drinking and consumption of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I think that's one of those, like you mentioned, it's one of those ideas or these thoughts that is instilled on us very early. Because I've never like had an alcohol issue, but I was in the same boat as you, where the parents in the family would get drunk at everything. Or like your friends would always be going to parties and get like, oh my God, I got so drunk last night. Like all of that was always there from like you mentioned, 13 upwards. it's just it's weird to me how, and it's one of these things that I never really thought about until later, where I was like, I really don't feel good when I drink. It's just weird to me how it's so normal. And I think you mentioned this in an interview you had where you were like, it's still an addiction. It's just one of those addictions that we're okay with.
Yeah, it alcohol is the only drug that anybody has to defend not taking. And like, if you offered me heroin right now, I'd be like, "Oh no, Harry, thank you very much. I don't need that." You'd be like, "Okay, cool." But if you offered me a drink right now, you'd be like, "Oh, why? What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Are you sick? Are you driving? Well, you can have one if you're driving." And it just becomes this huge ordeal where I or the person in that situation has to justify why I'm not going to consume this drug that has zero positive benefits. Literally, like, there's multiple, too many studies, peer reviewed studies, that alcohol does nothing for us. Our bodies don't know how to produce it. It's literal poison. So in that situation, how come like you spoke about when you were doing the intro, how come just a simple no thank you isn't enough when it comes to alcohol? It's beyond me, and that's a huge part of the reason why I wrote the book, told my story, is to let folks know that, hey, we all, whether you drink alcohol or not, a no should be no.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. So what kind of was the catalyst for you going to get help? Like when you hit, what was your rock bottom?
I didn't really have a rock bottom per se, like in that classic, the 12-step recovery program. I had two conversations with my best mate in the world, who I dedicated the book to, who's responsible for saving my life with those two conversations. We worked together in one of our restaurant projects. I've known him for 20 plus years, and he had two different conversations with me. He said, "I'm worried about you, A, as my brother, and B, professionally, you're starting to make my job harder because, you're drunk all the time." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I'll just try to get sober-ish." And I was drinking all day, every day here. The moment I woke up to the moment I literally passed out, and just trying to keep my shit together. That was all I was doing for a lot of years. And I decided to get really drunk on a Sunday afternoon. I was like, I'm just gonna have one last day of drinking. I'm gonna wake up Monday. I'm gonna feel fine. I had both those days off. I was in the hospitality industry at that time, and I'll be normal. I'll be fine. I'll be sober. I'll have a big hangover, and no big deal. And then I didn't start to feel better. Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday, I didn't know what was happening. I wasn't even sure if I was still alive. And then I guess if I had to say what, like, a rock bottom, was walking into the ER, and for the first time ever telling another human being that I am an alcoholic. I haven't had a drink in, at that point, I think 60, 70 hours, and I'm not even sure if this is real. And then the triage nurse looked at me, and within minutes I was in a ER room, hooked up to IVs, and they were doing their best to save my life because I was that close to death.
From cutting alcohol off, that your body reacted like that?
Yeah, like, you can become so physically dependent on alcohol. I didn't know any of this, Harry.
Hmm.
I didn't Google anything because my ego was such that it was, my drunk ego was in place, and it was in control. It was like, you don't have a problem, you'll be fine, no big deal. You know, like I said, just stop drinking and everything will be fine. This is 6.5 years ago now. I Google at my fingertips. I could have got knowledge. I could have seeked help or sought help, but I didn't because of my ego, and because I thought I was tougher than that. I didn't know that a human being's body could become so physically dependent on alcohol that when you don't put that amount of alcohol in, it starts to attack itself. My brain was shutting down. I don't have any medical evidence of this, but professionals that I've spoken to since have said that there's a pretty good chance that I had a couple of strokes. delirium tremens, the DTs. I was convulsing so bad. I was waking up all over my house, smashing my head on the floor because of the uncontrollable seizures, and then I'd knock myself out again. Like I said, I no prior knowledge, no desire to acquire any knowledge about it, and it damn near killed me.
And when you were in like those moments, like with the seizure, were you have no recollection of it? You were just kind of
I do, looking back in the moment. I, I didn't know whether I was alive or dead, and I mostly when I was having moments where the seizures had stopped and it just became shaking, I wanted to die. And I honestly dozens of times thought about how I could kill myself. But I lived in a two-story walk up, and you know, if I threw myself off the balcony, I would have broken a leg at best. Or, and I wasn't physically strong enough to go anywhere or do anything about it. Plus I was too chicken shit to do it. So I just kept going through it, kept going through it. And then reflecting back after I'd say about 18 months of sobriety, learning some different meditation techniques and some breath work. And I started to really, I call it, like, I had to go down into the basement and into the corners and do some deep, dark work and figure out, like, what was real, what wasn't. And that's when I started writing all my thoughts down. And I was like, okay, like, if I could just tell one person that this is an issue and this can happen, you can die from this, then that's what you got to do. And that started the whole path of getting it out there.
hmm
That's why I wrote the book. That's why I built it high speed, low drag. Like, it's not very long, and I just wanted to hit it hard, bring some levity to a situation that was really really shitty. And hey, you could die. Don't be a dumbass like I was. Get help at the end of the day.
yeah. Isn't that deep spring cleaning in the basement? Isn't that the worst? Like in your mind?
Oh man, like I just recently saw some TikTok reel type things where they do the cringe one. It's like thinking of all the times you did these certain things, and you're like, ooh, ah, and that's what doing all that work was like. I was like, oh man, and there's a I get really raw in the book with it too, because I tried to be 100% authentic and pull no punches. Like, I was a total jackass, steal my sister's allowance to go buy drugs and booze and stuff like that. Just to let people know that whatever you did, you can forgive yourself first for it, and you got to own it and move past it.
hmm Yeah, that's great. That's great words of advice. I'm kind of similar in the sense of when I went to get the help, I did no research either. I was just like, just give me the happy pill, let's go. And they gave me like it was like an antipsychotic or antipsychotic, and it was my body did not react properly at all. But I hadn't looked into it. So my doctor was like, "Are you sure you want to take this one?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on, come on, come on." And like right away, like I mentioned the story a bunch on like this podcast, but like my brain flatlined essentially. Like I had no emotion or reaction to anything, and like my heart, like I would start getting like palpitations, and
Oh
I would
wow.
go training for the swim team. Like they'd have to drag me out of the pool because like my heart felt like it was stopping, and that's when I was like, maybe I should have looked into it, because Google's right there, like you said, it's right at your fingertips.
Yeah, and just, I don't know whether, my father was a huge influence in my life when it came to masculinity and stuff, and I understand about the toxic masculinity stuff. I do believe that, being masculine and being a man is important, but there is a fine line there where, eh, our egos just get in the way. And ego is not a bad thing. Countless people that are way smarter than I am, dead and alive, talk about ego and how if you let it, it can get in your way to the point where, like you said, your swim mates are having to drag you out of the pool because you're in there, you're almost dying. Like, and that, I think, is ego and our unwillingness to face it head on, and just to be like you said, hit the easy button, give me whatever it is that you think I need. And and that'll kick your ass in a hurry.
Yeah, I wish there was an easy button. Like that's what a lot of people don't get. Is like in your situation, in my situation, in any situation where you're recovering from something or trying to help yourself, the journey sucks. Like,
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't change it for the world, Harry,
mm,
but it's it it sucks. Straight up. I got asked that question the other day, and they're like, "Well, was there one good thing that came from it?" I was like, "Well, I didn't die, and I'm in a position now where I can, you know, help just one or two people, maybe redefine their relationship with alcohol. But there is not one good thing that came from it." I make a joke in the book about uh, the hallucinations that I was experiencing, and if I could bottle that up and sell it, I'd be a billionaire. That's,
mm,
that could be one good thing that could come from it. But other than that, doing like the way out is through, and you just got to keep going.
mm-hmm,
We'll figure it out. This meat suit wants to stay alive, and no matter how hard we beat it down, whether it's with pharmaceuticals or antidepressants or illicit drugs, booze, whatever, it will do its best every second of every day to keep you alive. And I'm here because my physical body never gave up. A bunch of times I gave up mentally, and I just said, I'm done. But my body just said, well, no, let's just keep plugging away.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to this actor, and he's like he's an advocate for self harm, and he's like got a bunch of scars. His name's Ben, but he was talking about how excuse me, he was talking about how he's kind of tired of this whole narrative that some people put out where it's like a fairy tale journey. It's like it's not. Like, come on, you can sugarcoat it, but what kind of expectation is that setting for people who actually need help? That was like me. Like when I went to get help, I the only stories I heard were it'll get better. You're gonna get through it. It wasn't, hey, listen, man, it's gonna take years. And even when you feel like you've got it, you don't.
Yeah, that's a great point, Harry, for sure. Yeah, I'm not Willy Wonka. I don't sugarcoat shit,
Mm,
right? And in the way I speak, the way that I write, you know, people have often told me like, "Hey, man, you got to relax so much on the honesty. So and so, you said something to so and so, and now they think you're a huge jerk." And I was like, and I'd be like, "Okay, let's think about how I can frame this differently." It's not so much. It's like your spouse, significant other. Like, "Hey, babe, do these jeans make me look fat?" Well, no, it's your fat that makes you look fat. So can't be like, he's like, okay, don't say that. No, be like, oh, well, no, sweetie, perhaps the fabric is a little, or the cut, or this, as opposed to being that blatantly honest. But the journey sucks. And anybody out there that's saying, whether you're going through a self harm situation or you're going through an alcohol addiction, drugs situation, anybody that says that it was easy is lying. And I don't care who you are or how many years you've been sober or what your position or station in life is. You're fooling yourself, and you're fooling everybody else, and you're probably on your way to relapsing.
mm. Well, and that's just that doesn't really seem fair to you either. Like as a person, you're like, yeah, what I went through was meh. Like, come
Yeah,
on,
like
give yourself.
there's being there's being humble, and then there's just like being an arrogant ass.
That's true.
Like,
Yeah.
like I recognize when people are like, you must be so strong to have gone through what you went through. And I just say, thank you. You know, I'm not the strongest guy in the world. I'm not the weakest guy in the world. It's something that I went through. I don't recommend it at all. Like, don't do this at home, kids. You know, like listen to a podcast or reach out to a friend, or you'll find help in the strangest of places. But talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had medical professionals tell me that they wouldn't even put a percentage or a 0.1% on surviving what I went through.
Mm,
So I don't want anybody to do
right.
that, and you shouldn't have to.
No. I I didn't end up interviewing this person because well, you'll understand why in a second. But I reached out and asked them if they wanted to come on, and their agent answered me, which is fine. But they sent me a list of questions that I had to ask, and sometimes that's okay because I've had people's agents send me questions, and they were like, "Yeah, manipulate it how you want," and I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." But this person's agent sent like, how are you such an incredible person, like how did you overcome this so strong, like how are you so strong, like these questions. I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not going to kiss their ass. But also, like,
Hmm.
I don't want, like, well, we've been mentioning it the whole time, I don't want to sugarcoat anything. Like, yes, it sounds awful, but like, you get there. It's just the journey to there is going to suck at some points. It's just setting a realistic expectation, because for me and for a lot of people I've talked to personally, like I know personally, one little dip in the road and they're like, they feel like they're back to square one and they get sucked into that hole again because they've been told that it's just linear from here. Like, recovery is not linear. It's never linear.
No, life isn't linear.
No.
If, like I said, you're fooling yourself if you think that, regardless of where you're coming from in life, if you think that everything's going to be a straight line and there's not going to be any peaks and valleys, you, I don't. You must be on some serious drugs or seriously deluding yourself, because that's not how this ride. That's not how life is. That's not how it should be. You know, we should have to struggle. We should have the screws put on us, and that's where we grow and we get tougher, and we learn how to deal. And then through our example, through going through these things that you've gone through, Harry, that I've gone through, that other people have gone through, you can have an impact that way. You can let people know, like, you don't have to be out there, on your soapbox screaming it at the top of your lungs, or walking around downtown with a sign saying, everything is going to be okay. But just through living your life and having gone through those things, it makes us who we are.
Hmm. Well, and you said it too. Like, you don't have to shout your struggles out on the rooftop, but finding someone to talk to.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure. Just anybody. Like, it sounds cliche. We've seen it in Hollywood films, in countless nonfiction and fictional books about life. Like, just reach out to someone. But that's literally as hard and as easy as it is.
mm,
Like, I'm a firm believer that things in life are only as hard as we make them. And refusing to ask for help because of that ego monster, you could end up dead because of that. And I would like for you to not end up dead, you know.
yeah. Do you remember how hard it was for you to reach out at first?
Well, I didn't really reach out. I had those two conversations, and I took that on board. I said, this guy's my brother. He only wants the best for me, out of respect for him, because I didn't want to end up. I wasn't sure if I wanted to end up dead one day, but I said, let's just give it a shot. And then, like, I duct tape my whole sobriety. I've never worked a 12-step program. I went to one AA meeting about 3 weeks after I got out of the ER. It made me want to drink more. And I'm not saying, like, do whatever it takes for whatever your situation entails. If you need to go to a meeting every day, if you need to work a 12-step program, do it. For me, it didn't work that way. I was pretty lucky that, I got, my sister's amazing. I have like a core group of friends that were there, and they were like, look, hey, we're here to support you. Reach out if you need to. And like that last day before I went to the ER, a friend's wife, she reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to take you to an AA meeting. She'd been sober about 2 years or so at this point. I worked with her husband. And she said, I'm going to take you to an AA meeting. And I was lying to everybody at this point, but they knew that something was up. You know, you, I, I didn't have the flu in August, and that's what I was lying to everybody about.
Hmm.
And she called me back after I was lying to another person. I to lie to her to blow everybody off, just leave me alone. And then she said, I need you to describe to me exactly how you're feeling. And I was like, I haven't eaten in 3 days. I haven't been able to hold a sip of water down in 3 days, about 2 days at that point. And I'm waking up all over the house. I don't even know what's going on. And she said, you need to get to the ER right now. And I said, okay. And then I called my mom that was my reaching out for help situation. I think somewhere in our lizard brains, you reaching out to your mom is what you do. I've read countless books from first responders and other folks in life and death situations where, a lot of folks are just, battlefield guys dying, mom. I think it's got to be in there somewhere. So that's what I did. I reached out to my mom. I said, hey, mom, I need you to come pick me up and take me to the hospital. And that was the first and only time I had asked for help that whole time. And she unfortunately had been drinking that day at the pub, and she was thankfully didn't come and pick me up.
Mm.
So that was my ask for help. And for a brief moment, my drunk ego wasn't in charge, and just my normal ego was there, and I said, hey, it's okay to do this.
Yeah. Now, did you ever tell anyone about like your suicidal ideologies?
No,
No.
no, never once did I, in all the years that I was drinking as heavily as I was. That was a solid decade where I was drinking all day, every day. Never once did I ever tell anyone that I felt like I didn't want to live or I didn't want to go on. I just kept plugging away and doing what I did. And everybody, people would ask, hey, JT, how you doing? I'm fine. I'm great. Everything's awesome. Classic, right?
Mhm.
Everything's sunshine and rainbows. And it wasn't.
Yeah. Was it was like the toxic masculinity idea kind of like in the way of that?
For sure.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to deal with my feelings, and and now I've done all that work and stuff. I know now that I can feel sad, but I can't. It's not good to live in the emotion. Like,
Mhm.
feel sad, feel unhappy, feel frustrated, but you can't live in that emotion. Or for me, it would that living there would lead me down a dark path to start drinking and using drugs again. But for sure, toxic masculinity played a part into it, and ego, and just this thing that it was like, hey, boys don't cry, men don't cry, you know, you don't have feelings, suck it up. Like, my father used to tell me things like, I played organized sports, football and baseball and stuff like that. You get an injury, and he'd look at you, or he'd look at me, and he'd say stuff like, I think this is like a Jack Youngblood quote from, he's a linebacker for the Los Angeles Rams way back in the day, but he played with a broken leg, and they asked him, why'd you keep playing? He said, well, it wasn't bleeding and the bone wasn't sticking out, so I figured I was fine. And my dad would tell me like something like that, like, are you bleeding? No. Is the bone sticking out? No. You're fine. Get back in there. You're just like, okay, Roger that. And you're just like, or you get a concussion, and I'd be like, bell rung, can't see, tunnel vision, and coach looks at you, you're fine, son, get back in there. Okay, like, and I had injuries where my knee was bent the wrong way, or my wrist arm broken, and they're just like, okay, yeah, you're injured. I'm like, oh, okay, now it's okay to be injured and hurt.
Mhm.
But for sure, all that stuff, the way that, and unfortunately, the way that we still tell men and boys that it's not okay to do those things. And I think, you and I just having this conversation lets everybody know, lets all men out there know that, it's okay. You can have feelings. You can be hurt.
Yeah.
Things will get better.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
Seriously. Yeah. No, um I remember when I first opened up to people who weren't like my parents, because my parents were the first people that knew, and then it was like your close circle. But when I opened up to a lot of people, I was so scared because no one talked about it. And like that's kind of what I'm sure you feel the same, but like that's kind of what fuels me now doing all this work is like I go back to how I felt when I first opened up and like how terrified I was and like the fact that it had prevented me from opening up for so long. It's like I don't want anyone else to be that afraid to go, "Hey, I get sad sometimes." Like it's I don't want to say it's crazy, but it's kind of nuts that we're still there. Like there's so much research put into mental health. There's so many stats. There's so many papers, and we're still like, if you can't see it, you're fine.
Yeah, I think judging is a huge part of that, and feeling
Mhm.
like you're being judged is something that I don't even think a lot of us realize that we do it.
Yep.
You know, like you said about like if you can't see it, it must be okay. Well, that is not the case. You know, there are too many situations in my life where I remember being about to say something, um, like being sad when my father's mom died, and I was like 8, and I was about to tell uh, my mom that I was sad about this, you know, and then my dad would come in and he'd be like, you know, no crying at the funeral, and I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, yep, no worries, Dad, I'm a big boy, you know, and I was about to tell my mom that like, you know, I'd stayed up all night crying because I missed my grandma because I was 8 years old, I didn't know how to deal with death, you know, and then I'm about to say to my mom, Mom, I'm really sad, like I don't think I can get through this. I'm 8, you know. Make sure you don't cry at the funeral, kid. Sir, yes, sir. You know, for all of the amazing things that my dad did for me, and you know, I'm all of the awesome things and all of the not so awesome things as his son. And same goes with my mom, right? I think we all are. And then you kind of bolt up on those pieces, and then going through something like I did with my whole addiction and recovery story, I realized that I got to get rid of a bunch of that stuff, and
Hmm.
it's okay to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's also the environment they grew up in, right? Like my when my parents first heard, they judged, but not like not intentionally. It was just like we haven't really heard of that before, and we don't
Mm,
really understand it. Um, so it's great that we can have talks like this because at least the younger kids who might listen, like they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of this before," or like when they feel that way, they're like, "Oh, actually, I saw something where people were talking about it." Because before I legit I didn't know the word depression until I was 19, and I had been depressed since I was 10. It's just it's a
yeah.
strange thing, and like going back to what you were talking about on the sports field, I remember when I played rugby in high school, I got fucking rocked. Like I got hit so hard by this big guy in Europe because we went on a European tour, and the guys over there they're born with rugby balls in their hands. But this guy was like 350 pounds. I swear to God, he didn't have a neck. He was huge, and no one on my team wanted to tackle him. And people that big over here in Ontario who played high school rugby didn't know how to play, so they were very easy to take down. So I was like, oh, I'll take him, like whatever. But this guy was born playing, so I got a knee right to the head, like full speed, and I
Ow.
blacked out. I went limp, and I remember coming back, and I was clearly concussed. But one thing with concussions is sometimes your emotions like go like this all at once. So they were like, "Are you okay?" And I started laughing and crying at the same time because I didn't know where I was exactly. And I played the rest of the game because we had no subs. But I remember for a year I got made fun of for that. They were like, "Aren't you the guy that cried?" I was like,
Wow.
"Yeah," because my brain got rocked.
Yeah.
I can't even
Yeah.
cry then.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm sure that some of your teammates, if they were getting made fun of because they weren't making fun of you.
Yeah.
You know, like, and if anybody tried to stand up for you, they'd be like, well, you know,
Well,
well, you know,
that's
must not be as tough as Harry, so you know, why don't you go hang out with him? You'd be like, come on, man,
yeah.
it's
It's the
crazy now. Like
yeah.
CTE, all this stuff in that space is leading to so many suicides and so many different mental health issues where it's great now that some of the professional leagues, NHL specifically, dealing with like concussion protocol, NFL, like you got to realize now that it's not just a physical thing. Like these physical like CTEs, it's leading to all these things like addiction issues and all kinds of different stuff. And then some of these guys are taking their own lives because you know they either they won't ask for help or it just gets so dark that you can't get back from that spot, and that's crazy. It's
Hmm.
2021.
I
Let's
know.
talk about stuff.
I know.
It's great. Like Bell Mental Health Awareness Day. Bell Mental Health Awareness every day. Like,
Dude.
come on, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
I have some very strong opinions on that. Because I do like the premise. Take Bell out for a second because people are like, oh, it's like a corporate scheme. Like, I don't care. Like, look, the fact that we can have a day where people talk about it openly is fine. It's a good place to start. But that's exactly what it should be. It should be a place to start. The problem is you get people talking all that day and then nothing for the rest of the year.
yeah,
There's people
right.
there's people hashtagging Bell Let's Talk Day. And I'm like, I've never seen you talk about it. And then even now, like this episode's coming out later, but we're filming this in March. Where's your like
Yeah.
you don't have to post about it, but even in person, you're not talking about it.
Hmm.
Like you're just going for a like. It's like, and I talk about this a lot. Is like when George Floyd um like died, and all these people posted the black square on Instagram, but didn't do anything else or didn't like you didn't even have to like even if you weren't going out to like the protests, they didn't do any research, they didn't like talk to people or like learn something. They just posted the black square, got some likes and said okay, I'm good, I'm good. It's kind of like that. It's like where were you the rest of the year? So yeah, I agree. Like the Bell Let's Talk Day is like it's great, but can we, like you said, do it every day, please?
Yeah. I think you mentioned it earlier about like just two guys having a conversation like this, and if somebody hears this and they remember back to it, like you got to build a foundation,
Mm-hmm.
because if your foundation is weak, everything else that you're stacking on top of that is going to fall apart eventually. Like I often make a joke about like duct taping my sobriety, and that's how I've done it for 6.5 years without ever having gone to rehab or work a 12-step program or something like that. But just having this conversation builds a foundation on which other people can then, like you said, refer back to and know that like you there's a space and it's safe and you can talk about it. And anybody that tells you otherwise is an asshole. Like for your listeners out there, if anybody tells you that, at me, I'll have a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not going to go very well for them because I'll be a little bit aggressive and I'll be honest though, and you'll probably cry. But then from there, I'd like to be your friend and we can build on that foundation and we can all move forward from this. It doesn't, it, some days it makes zero sense to me. And I think that we're doomed. And then other days, I think when I meet someone like you and we have a conversation like this, I'm like, there is hope as long as we keep having the conversation. Like hashtag mental health awareness every single day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I sometimes like when I was on TikTok once and these people were like, "Oh my god, I'm just so suicidal." I'm like,
Oh wow.
"We're going backwards, man." Like that's not
Yeah.
stop it. What are we doing?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in well, you talked about it with again, I can't remember the guy's name in the NLP conversation, but like the the words that we choose to use, like words are spells, you know, to put like a bit of a Harry Potter spin on it. But the words that we use and stuff like that, they resonate with our bodies, and we're vibrational beings. And if we're using low vibrational language and stuff like that, and even just saying something like, feeling suicidal, ha ha ha, that's your brain, your body, your cells, they're taking that input into like, are we feeling suicidal?
Mm-hmm.
And like, and it all comes down to just stuff like just change the narrative. If we just use more inclusive words and more positive words, as opposed to making jokes and shields up, using humor as a defense mechanism stuff. Humor is great. I love it. I've been told I'm a pretty funny guy. I've been told that there's some tragically hilarious parts of the book, and I love stand-up comedy and stuff like that. But uh, if it's used as a defense mechanism to not show someone your true feelings or emotions, then and that's again something that we have to discuss as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had people I know who they've made jokes, but in a way where you're like, you're not joking, and it's like it's okay to not, like, you can tell us, like, we're not gonna kick you out, because I like to think that my friend circle's pretty tight. But you hear those jokes and you're like, man, that's not the right way to go, man.
Yeah, in that situation, I've had a couple of experiences in the past few years where um, I've heard that, ha ha, ha, I'm an alcoholic,
Mm,
and I'm like, that guy's not joking. And
yeah.
I've left it alone in that situation. Especially in my previous career, we had a couple hundred staff at over the 4 restaurants that we had, and I'd circle back to that person and I'd be like, hey man, just to let you know, if you don't want to drink, that's cool. I don't drink. If we're whatever situation, like, and they'd be like, well, what do you mean, JT? And I'd be like, well, I've been sober this amount of time, and I heard you make a comment one time in a group situation when the staff was all hanging out, and you said that you're an alcoholic. Like, if you're drinking too much, you can come talk to me. And sure enough, like 10 days later, that guy came to me and was like, hey man, I'm drinking every day after work. I need to stop, to roll this back. And I didn't have the tools in my arsenal of awesomeness then to help him. Like, I'm not a recovery counselor, addictions counselor. I'm not a medical professional by any stretch of the imagination, but I can get you in touch with people that are. And that's what we did. And it started with he was a younger guy. He was 22, and it it started with his parents, and then it started with everybody going down and talking it out. And then his father was like, I'm drinking too much, you
Mm,
know and like we said, going back to being kids and stuff in those environments where you and I were growing up, where it was all around, like, more is caught than is taught when it comes to kids. I'm not a parent yet, maybe one day, but I believe that. So like, kids are watching and listening, and that's how they're learning. They're absorbing all these things, and I know that from my own personal experience. I want it to be just like the adults, where Friday and Saturday night you drank, you had a great time, and Sunday you laid around and you watch football, and you ordered pizza, and because mom didn't want to cook, because mom was up sick, all night the night before, because she had too much fun. That's what my parents told us when we were kids. Your auntie had too much fun. Your mom had too much fun with your auntie last night, and so it's quiet time now. So as kids, I couldn't wait to get into that situation.
mm,
I didn't know that it was gonna eventually lead to me almost dying.
yeah. Well, they're like, that idea that kids don't register anything. Like, kids are sponges, man.
Yeah,
They take everything. Like,
for sure.
we don't give kids enough credit just because they're little people. Like, you're like, oh, their brain isn't developed. It's like, no, but it's developing, and it
Yeah,
takes everything it's seeing. Like,
yeah,
most of the time, you can like attribute things that in your adult life, if you really trace it back far enough, most of it is from growing up, like as a kid. It's we don't pay enough attention to that in the sense that like kids do. They might not know what's going on, but they understand like the feelings in the moment. They understand, they have a general idea. Let's just say that. Like it's important to recognize that.
Definitely. And like you said, like about depression and you recognizing it at 19, and examining your life up until or all the way back to when you were 10 years old. Like I at 19, I didn't know that I was drinking because I was unhappy, and I was unhappy because I was drinking. So you know, kudos to you, and you're a hell of a lot stronger and smarter person than I am, Harry, because you were able to recognize that at a hell of a lot younger age than I ever did, and I was in my late 30s before I realized how depressed I actually was, and how I couldn't figure it out, and I just kept pouring more booze in to the point where I stopped doing other drugs, smoking pot and you know hash and cocaine and all kinds of other drugs, because those were interfering. Those were making me too sick, and I couldn't drink as much. And I would, because I was depressed. My parents got split up and divorced. I moved out with my dad. All of these things compounded to me not feeling like I was worthy to be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's because I didn't, like I said, my dad said that it wasn't cool to talk about your feelings.
Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't.
Oh God, no.
No. Like it.
You know,
Yeah.
like when you talk about that guy who got handed, his agent handed you the sheet of questions that you had to ask, and it was all like, you got to ask me questions about how I'm so awesome. Like that's unhealthy in and of itself.
Mm.
Like that guy's got to still be suffering from whatever he went through, because he's just looking for other people to tell him that he's so great. That doesn't make any sense. And cheers to you for being uh brave enough to not have him on your platform. He's not somebody that you want to be associated with. Like you said, we talked about sugarcoating things. All that guy wanted to do was to be told how awesome he was, and sugarcoat what it is that he went through.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I try to do at least a little bit of research before I bring people on, and that I just did not get a good vibe. I was like, this guy's using my platform to advertise. I'm not really about, like, you can
Mhm.
advertise, I don't care. But if you're not going to sit down and have an honest conversation, then I don't really want you here. I don't want to advertise something for you if you're just going to sit here and go, I'm only here for this reason. My
Yeah.
book or my movie or my whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, like, come on.
Yeah. I was speaking to another guy about a podcast and stuff like that, and he said, we'll definitely talk about the book. And I said that if we didn't talk about the book, I'd be okay with that. If we just had a conversation about things that we've gone through, that would be great. And he was like, well, no, no, no. Like, he mentioned sponsors and stuff like that. And I was like, I, okay, I didn't really get it. I'm new to this space, but like, I'd be just as happy walking away from this with having met you and had a great conversation about, mental health and well-being, and, and never mentioning the book once.
Mm-hmm.
It helps, but it's not imperative. And I
No,
don't think you feel that way either.
no, no, I definitely don't. What I do love about your story is that, like you mentioned, you're not a professional, but there's so much value in having someone who's gone through it as opposed to someone who's trained to talk about it. And I'm not taking anything away from people like that. I talk about this about therapists the same way. Is like I found more value in talking to people who had gone through it as opposed to people who are trained to talk about it. Um, and like I still needed therapists. It's just having both was so important, and that's why I love what you're doing, and why I love that you wrote the book. I wanted to actually wait. Sorry, my mind's going everywhere. Sometimes it's hard to like grab a thought, you know what I mean?
Oh, hey man, I get that for sure.
uh but another thing I love about your story is that it's one of those that could happen to anybody because we're in this society that normalizes drinking so much. Um, and then in terms of addiction, like I wanted to ask you because like I've talked to a couple addicts, and I just remember growing up, like there were addicts at our school, like addicted to cocaine, addicted to meth, like actual addicts. But our only like idea or vision of an addict was like that super like shriveled up person on the street, like shaking. And
Yeah.
so we just kind of, when we heard people were addicted to things, we kind of just tossed them to the side. I don't, I wanted to get your opinion on this. Like, why is it that when someone's addicted to something and needs our help, why do we just throw them away?
That's a great question, Harry. I would say it's because if we engaged with that person, it would shine that light back on us, and we would start questioning our own behaviors and thoughts when it came to drugs and alcohol and addiction. It You can't have a conversation with someone about not drinking and them. In my personal experience, you can't have a conversation with someone about me not drinking and them not bringing up how much or how little they drink and trying to defend why it is that they're drinking. So I think that we just toss away that addict because we're worried ourselves about being judged by others, and nobody wants to shine that light back on themselves and do the hard thinking about their own relationship with whatever drug or alcohol that it is. Like, I'm a firm believer that if you're going to point that finger out there, that you got to bring it right around just as quick, and realize that you see a little bit of yourself in that person, and it scares the shit out of you, and you're just like, okay, well, no, Jimmy's addicted to meth. He's just gonna go and be homeless and die. And if you help Jimmy, then everyone would judge you. Why are you helping Jimmy? And then you would then have to say, well, because I also am addicted to Percocet,
Hmm.
or I see something in Jimmy that scares me enough to realize that I might have to make a change when it comes to my relationship with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. Sad, man. Um,
It is sad. It's honestly, Harry, I think there are more people that look like me and that have careers and relatively, we'll put it in air quotes, like normal lives, that are addicts and are suffering in with mental health and addiction and their own well-being than there are those shriveled up, you know, meth heads that you see at a Union Station, out front, like curled up in the corner, just, trying to hope not die. I think there's a lot more of folks that look so-called normal on the outside than there are those folks where you look at them and you're like, oh, that person's a crackhead.
mhm. Yeah. And yeah. Well, so what would you want those people to hear then if they were listening to this and kind of thinking, shit, maybe I am addicted.
I would say to them that, like we talked about, it's not an easy conversation to have with yourself, but you're a hell of a lot stronger than you think you are, and you're a hell of a lot more brave than you think you are to have that conversation with yourself. And I would say you might not be addicted, but you might have an unhealthy relationship. And if you choose to just change the narrative, change the words a little bit, it might not scare you as bad. And that all you have to do is say no to a drink once, and it'll become easier. And if somebody asks you, I used to lie I believe it. I try to be as honest as the day is long, except when it comes to being in situations where someone offers me a drink and I don't want to get into the whole I've been sober for 4.5 years, because then that person will get all twisted and then they'll try to defend their drinking to me, and I'll just be like, "Oh, I'm driving." Is that lie going to lead me down a dark path where I'm going to start drinking? No, I've got the tools and I've got my arsenal of awesomeness. I know how I can not let that happen. But for those folks, it would just be if you just didn't have a drink once, and you'll feel better. And if you just keep stacking those successes of saying to your mate, "Oh man, I'll come out to the pub with you, but I'll have a soda," and he'll take the piss out of you for 5 minutes, and then you guys will, that'll be the end of it, and you'll watch the game, and you'll go home with more money in your pocket. You'll wake up better on Wednesday morning than you normally would have if you had 7 pints and a couple of Jameson, or obviously whatever your poison is. But and after that, it gets a little easier. I have had so many former staff that I didn't even have a great relationship with when we were all working in our restaurants that have reached out to me since the book went live, I guess about a month ago, and they're like, "Hey JT, reading your book gave me the strength to say no to every run at the end of the shift when everybody was like, 'Hey, let's go to the pub.'" And I was like, "Hey man, that's amazing. I'm super proud of you. You know, if you're Here's my number. If you're ever feeling like you're in a bind and you might make a decision that you don't want to make, reach out to me." And that warms my heart and can't make me happier. So that's what I would say. Say no once.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be tough, but it's not going to kill you, and it'll get easier after that. And for the love of God, if you are drinking to the point where you think that it is a more serious issue, then you just want to feel better, or then reach out to somebody, and you got to get help, because I don't I don't know how I made it through that alive, but I wouldn't want anybody else to go through that, because you might not make it out,
Mm-hmm.
and that would make me feel terrible. I lost a dear friend of mine last May, and I told him. He called the last time he called me. He'd been drinking. We'd put him into rehab two times, 3 times. I wasn't involved in that. The same guy who I credit with saving my life, he was taking him to rehab, and then last May he relapsed again. But before that, I told him, I was like, "You can't call me when you're drunk. I'm not strong enough to help you. If you call me when you're sober, I can help you." So the last conversation I had was me turning my back on this guy, and he died. He relapsed. He fell down, concussed himself. Went to the hospital. Next day, fell down again, and they figured he hit his head again. And then they did a 24-hour wellness checkup on him, and he was dead. So, and I don't want that to happen to anybody else. I wasn't strong enough then, a year or more ago, to help him at that point, but I'm strong enough now. I've put those tools in my toolbox to be able to help anybody out in that situation now. But that fucking sucked.
I don't think people really like I think it's underestimated the strength of an addiction. Like all the time when we're talking about addicts, there's always, oh, just stop it. Like, why are you so stupid? Why do you keep doing it? It's a lot harder than that. Like, I think that's where it starts too. Like where we can slowly get to a less judgy and more um like a more tight knit community, at least, because we just have this ideology where just stop it. Like, it's that easy, but it's not. You're a great example of that. Your friend from like last May, the May before, is a great example of that. Well, you know what I mean. He's a great example of that. Is like it really isn't that easy.
No, and you can read countless. you know, celebrity recovery memoirs out there where some of these folks have been to rehab like 27 times, and the 28th time it worked. And then you get a dumbass like me who decides that he's not going to do any research. He's just going to get super extra day off wasted, wake up the next day and everything will be fine. And he almost dies. And I live and I haven't touched a drink or drug in over 6.5 years now. So it's an individual thing. You know, it's not easy. It can kill you if you let it. And again, with that stigma of saying no to a drink, because society has conditioned us so well. The big alcohol, the marketers of alcohol have conditioned us so well that it's fine. And you can hear all of these things. It's like, well, and then it comes down to it. Well, just stop. Well, I can't. My body is physically dependent on it. Like nothing in the world, Harry, that is good for you will kill you if you try to stop using it. Like apples are good for you. If I stopped eating apples, I'm not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
If I drink to the point where I was consuming as much as I was and I stopped, I'm going to die if I don't get it. And that's why there are so many programs now like CAMH and a Renaissance House in Toronto where they're like, you need to come see us and we'll help you with withdrawal correctly. But nothing that is good for you will kill you if you stop it. Like it's alcohol is poison. Your body can become so dependent on it. I've heard different debates about this and read different literature where it states that alcohol is the only drug out there that if you withdraw from incorrectly will kill you. Not heroin, not cocaine, not meth. You go through some rough times, but if you withdraw from alcohol incorrectly, your body has become so dependent on it that you could seize, stroke, any cardiac arrest, any number of things, and you'll be dead.
Mm-hmm. And to that point again, like when people say just stop drinking, it's like you're a great example of why you have to get the help. You can't just pull out cold turkey.
Oh yeah, that'll kill you.
Jesus.
Quite literally. I think more people have tried to do what I did and died than have not. So, thank you to the universe, to all the gods that it didn't. And I'm here to have a conversation with you, so maybe just one person in your audience can hear this conversation, have something resonate with them, and they can redefine their relationship with alcohol and do it correctly.
Mm-hmm. I hope so too, man. Where can my viewers find you? Where can they find the book?
The book is Amazon, all major outlets, Google Play, all that sort of stuff. JT Wahlberg, punch it into whatever browser, social media platform you're using. I'm most active on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, not so much. But like I said, punch in JT Wahlberg and you can find me there. And if you're looking to start a dialogue about your own relationship with alcohol, hit me up. Like we discussed, I'm not a professional, but I can listen and I can point you in the right direction to get some help.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, JT. First of all, like I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you coming on to talk to me. I appreciate you writing the book and talking on different platforms because I do believe that this is something we should be talking about more. So thank you again, brother, for coming on. This was special.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Harry. I think we had a great conversation, and like I said, I'm just lucky to be in a position now where we can have conversations like this and go deeper.
Yeah, 100%. And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of my show. If you want more episodes of the H Panel, the button's going to be right here. If you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, It'll be right down below. Please like, comment, share, give 5 stars. Let's keep this conversation going, guys, all right? I'll see you next time. Thank you for your support.